This is Michael David Cobb-Bowen for Cobb Vision, and today I'd like to handle a prickly subject, which is kind of difficult, which is why I'm recording a video as well as blogging this. And the subject is, in a racial discussion, who owns context, and what is the proper context for Americans to determine the nature of a racist threat. Of course, this is about Reverend Wright, his church, something tangential to the Obama campaign, but not about Obama, really. And it involves a bit of a controversy that I've had running debate with, well, it's not a running debate, but with Victor Davis Hanson, the historian professor in California, who talks about how he sees a number of contextual arguments as beside the point, which is to say, Reverend Wright has uttered some outrageous racist remarks, and there is no context in which you can excuse these. And of course, I think there is. And he recognizes that there might be. So there's a couple things that I want to say. Number one, my primary concern here is the ability of all Americans to come to one reasonable standard about what racism is and what to do about it. And we haven't done that. So the first thing I would suggest is to consider the let me put it this way. You can't just say, that's racist. You can't just come right to that bottom line, point your fingers and scream, because that doesn't do anything. It's not proportional. It's not a proportional response. And it's what white folks complain about black folks all the time. Well, all they say is that's racist, and is it really racist? And that presumes that everything that's racist requires somebody to be burned at the stake. And it's not true. So you have to assess, really, you have to assess the racist threat. You have to assess the value or the danger of the crime. So the question is, and in America, it's not against the law to be racist. Racist speech is protected political speech. And you may or may not agree with that, but it is. And so while there's nothing that we can say, the law says you can't say this, it is social pressure which allows us to get back. And the social pressure in this case about Wright is basically a bunch of polemical articles and outrage and maybe a vote. Vote for Obama or against Obama if you think it's appropriate to associate Obama with Wright. So the people aren't having fist fights in bars, as far as I know. And certainly nobody's marching in the streets or burning down buildings and throwing Molotov cocktails, having riots in the streets over this thing. So this is a matter of, it does represent something of an evolution in that this is about social power. And how social power is going to be expressed here is a very interesting thing. And in that way it does parallel the O.J. case, or the release of O.J., because again, this was a moment in time which people have editorialized a great deal about. But it hasn't, the effort has been in society in a peaceful way, but just a war of words, as it were. So here with Reverend Wright, we can take a Republican side or a Democrat side and say they have some authority over who's the right context. You could have a black side or a white side. I'm going to take the black and white for a minute because I think this is not necessarily a political battle, again, because Obama is just tangential to the fact of what Wright was saying. Wright wasn't saying those things for Obama, for his campaign, or in any political context. Wright isn't running for office. Wright is a social critic, a fire and brimstone preacher at times, and that is what he's saying to his flock. The reasons why are important, but we're not going to get into that. The point is, how would the white side and the black side come together and say, okay, we agree that Reverend Wright has said these things and they are racist. Okay, fine. That That is a reasonably conceived point. Now the question is, does that make him a dangerous individual? Does that make his church a dangerous church? And this is the questions that I was bringing up in the first place, which is, why hasn't the FBI shut down the church? The FBI hasn't shut down the church because he is not a clear and present danger to America. If you say "goddamn America," and you say it to a church audience of 1,000, and those are 1,000 poor people, although I'm not saying that that is the case in Reverend Wright's church, that's one thing. But if you get on the Senate floor and say it to 100 senators, "goddamn America," well, then you're in big trouble. Okay, so between those two extremes, where does Wright lie? And how good is our ability to assess the latent threat involved in that? So here, Victor Davis Hanson is taking up the issue about, is he an anti-Semite? Does Wright support Farrakhan? And even if Wright does support Farrakhan, which I'm not saying he does or doesn't, what influence does that actually have on our Israel policy? It's negligible. Everybody knows to discount Farrakhan. Everybody knows to discount anti-Semitic rhetoric from what America actually does. And everybody knows that even Louis Farrakhan, as anti-Semitic as he might be, has never laid a finger on any Jew in this country, and has never really impeded any Jew's progress in America. All he's done is spew hate, but has that been incitement? Okay? So it hasn't been incitement, and you can make all kinds of moral pronouncements on whether or not Wright is right or wrong, or Farrakhan is right or wrong, and I don't mean to excuse or permit anything that they say, but ultimately, what is the price paid? What is the nature of the threat? What is the danger to America? It seems to me that the danger here is somewhat less than the danger posed by crudity in Hollywood movies. Precisely because, number one, Wright has a smaller audience, and he's not going to get a bigger audience because of the offensiveness of what he says, and the way he says it makes him only appealing to a certain fraction of the population. And it is something that we're just going to have to live with. If we all adopted a zero-tolerance policy for offensive racial statements, then black folks, let's just take it from a black perspective. If I absolutely had to say zero tolerance for racism, I'd go out of my mind. I mean, I think everybody would. If Obama can see racism in his own grandmother, and he had zero tolerance, then he would go out of his mind. And so I think a zero tolerance approach makes sense theoretically, but it doesn't make sense for us building a consensus about what to do about the racism that's obviously all around us in the society. And I think the thing is that we have to be practical, and we have to say what is the real threat. And I would give an example of the threat, for example, is the racial violence here in Los Angeles County between black gangs and Latino gangs. That's something that results in real crime, real pain, death in shootings, and you'll never ever hear a Latino gang member on TV preach hate. But we know that the hate is really there, and we know that this is a big conflict in American jails and prisons between the different races of prisoners. So again, let's be a little bit more sophisticated in assessing the racist threat. You know, somebody can say something derogatory about black women, like Don Imus did, but never go as extreme as the Dunbar Village rapists. And one has to be able to connect the dots to see if these kinds of things are related. Like all people, I'm going to be against the degrading of what goes on out in the air. And so I don't want to see very provocative statements, very offensive statements, racist statements being made in the general public. But I have to understand that they will be made, and that people will have enough sense not to act on them. And so I think that benefit of the doubt accrues to Reverend Wright's church, and it accrues to people who have some ethics of their own, that they're able to tolerate this kind of thing with the recognition that sensible people are not going to act on them, and that none of this rises to the level of against the law. Still, we have to come to consensus, and we have to continue the conversation, even though I don't want to, and nobody really wants to. We all want to have it our way. We all want to own the context. We all want to have our own definitions and satisfy our own needs. And that's the way it is. But we can do better, and we will. This is Michael David Cobb Bowen, Cobb Vision. Peace.